shoot. Uh, I'm looking up the website now.
Okay.
Have you heard of netgalley.com?
NetGalley? No.
So I found it because of St. Martin's, the publisher for Brian McLaren's book that we're
Yep.
reading.
Yeah.
Um, if you go to their website and request a review copy, it sends you to it asks you for a questionnaire, but it also asks for your NetGalley email address.
Hmm.
And I was like, "What's that?" So I looked up NetGalley, and it's specifically for people to get early copies of books. So
Really?
you make a thing. You can say what kind of topics you're interested in. When you do that, you can search by author or by topic or by publisher or whatever.
Huh.
And then you find a book and you just say, like, yeah, I want to read that. And it gets reviewed. And then so far, I'm 6 for 6. I requested 6 books and got 6 digital copies of them.
Wow.
So I have Tenderness by Eve Tushnet. Never heard of her. I have a history of contemporary praise and worship. How Scripture interprets Scripture. I have a book by Eugene Peterson called On Living Well. How to Fight Racism Young Readers Edition by Jamar Tisby.
Hmm.
And What Are Christians For by Jake Medor or Medor. And there's a book by Henry Nouwen that I really, really want that's about the trapeze artists, and I've been alluding to that.
Why
I
do I know
think
that
that
name, Henry Nouwen?
he's a famous Christian theologian writer.
Okay.
I've never read him, but I think Sky Jitani, when he talks about the trapeze artists, I think he's actually talking about Henry Nouwen, who like followed a troupe of trapeze artists for a few years
Oh. Okay.
and talks about faith and stuff. So,
Huh.
anyways, netgalley.com. Um, don't request too many books or you'll be overwhelmed like I am. But
Is there a like a you have to do a review or something, or just
I don't know what happens if you're like a bad, like if you don't do it. But they
yeah?
do request. You say things like, "I like the. Why did I choose this book? Did I like the cover? Did I like the title?"
Hmm.
But then they want you to review it, and I think in general, what they want is for you to tell people, like you said that publishers, the two that you've talked to, have both said we're always looking for people to
Yeah.
spread the
Yeah.
word. I think that's what this is. They're like, yeah,
Huh.
we just want people to find our books easily and then like it and tell all their friends and leave a. It says like please leave a Amazon review or please tell us if you find a problem, like if it's
Hmm.
there's a typo or something. So
Cool. A lot of publishers. Dad gum.
oh yeah, it's everybody. Yeah,
Everybody.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah. It might be like yeah, if you're, I don't know, if either your kids are really into some genre, it's probably the cheap way to read a bunch of books. Um,
Erdman's not on there.
no, yeah, and I
Okay.
was wondering if it was under W. I haven't looked.
Oh, William B. Erdman. It is
Is it?
WM.B. Erdman's Publishing Company.
I forgot to go back and look, so I need to add them to my favorites. Bad Faith. Race and the Rise of the Religious Right by Randall Balmer.
I think I have that book.
And so if you've like read one of these and it was good, it's probably one of our best bets at getting an author to talk to us because it will give
Hmm.
you like here's our
Oh, like publicist stuff.
uh-huh.
Now I've got the book Christians Against Christianity, which I never really finished it.
And like NT Wright. Like yeah, sure. I'll That's
Yes,
cool.
please.
Um yeah, so
Cool.
and Juez.
Oh, if you care, I found a. I have an extra one of these
I think that might be the same.
webcam.
I
I
probably should just buy my own replacement. I think I would get.
I just came across it today. It's early pandemic. We bought one for Noah's computer, and they sent two.
They
And
were just frantic.
Yeah,
Get them all
well,
out.
I got a hold of Amazon. I'm like, yeah, I got two. They're like, yeah, I just keep it. I'm like, all right.
Whew. You ready?
Yeah.
Hey, Steve. How's it going?
Hey, Nathan. I'm
I
doing
don't
pretty
know.
good. I had a
I was gonna say I don't know what
crazy
to
day.
say after that because we just caught up in secret without people listening to us because we don't want them to hear all of our secrets. But now
We're
we can
talking inside baseball, man. Shh.
we can pretend like we just like ran into each other and we're like, whoa, I guess let's record a podcast right now.
Yeah.
Hey.
Right.
Yeah, but how are you doing?
No, good. Kind of crazy day. Like one of those all days of meetings at work. And then I had an MRI at 8 a.m. this morning, just kind of a regular routine one. And then I had the plumber come by in the middle of one of my meetings to check on the
That's
water heater
right.
that's making weird sounds. And
Your new
I
water
forgot.
heater?
Yeah, it's like whenever it turns on, it's a tankless one, so it has to like start this pump running,
Okay.
and it vibrates the floor, and like all the way to the top of the house.
Hmm.
And we're like, this didn't used to happen. We got it like 5 months ago, and it just started happening.
Yeah,
And
that's
they're like,
scary.
well, we can't figure it out, and they figured out that they mounted it poorly. They're thinking, so they're gonna come back out next week and like take it all off, and then they realized that the guy who installed it had done it wrong, so they had to put a new gas line in and a new blah blah blah.
Rats.
At least I'm not paying for any of it.
It's all warranty or something?
Yeah, it's all warranty. They're like, we want to make you happy, Mr. Martin. I'm like, oh, thank you very much, appreciate it.
I want to be happy. So this
Yeah,
is a good relationship. You
if all
said
it takes is plumbers to make me happy, then I'm good.
finally. Um,
You're
you
there
said
all
something
along.
about falling asleep in your.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I guess I've ended up on I'm like on number 9 that I've done recently, and yeah, I was listening. They always say we got Pandora. What station do you want? I'm like, give me an Iron and Wine station because it's really nice and calming. And
It put you
it,
out.
yeah, so he went back to the thing and started the MRI, and it's about 20 minutes long just for your brain. And I'm laying there and I'm listening to the clunk clunk clunk, all the
It's
weird
really
sounds.
loud.
It's
Yeah,
really loud. Well, they give you earplugs and headphones. That's not too bad, but and it was actually keeping me awake. I'm like, this is kind of interesting. I'm like, kind of figuring out, imagining which scans they're doing at what time, And then he turns the
because you can
music on
feel
like,
it vibrating the floor of your brain. You're like, I think they
yeah,
mounted it
right.
wrong. Is that supposed to happen?
And then he forgot and he turned the music on like 6 minutes into the thing, and then I'm like, oh, that's kind of nice. I fell asleep, and the whole time I was trying to keep my legs still from tremoring because it will like shake your whole body and make everything blurry. And I must have started tremoring or something in my sleep because the guy was like, "Hey, how you doing in there? We're almost done." Really non-subtle way of saying, "Wake up, dude."
Yeah. If you wake up, do you stop tremoring?
Yeah, I sort of. I can with with Parkinson's tremors, you can usually, if I like use all my Jedi mind powers to like say do not tremor,
Yeah.
and that's all I think about, no problem. But the second I start thinking about the song that's playing or whatever, it might start up again if it's an off meds moment.
Right.
Not too bad though.
Well,
But we made it through, and looks like no new lesions or anything, so I'm good
that's good.
for another 6 months or so. So
Yeah. It's like a $900 nap, isn't it?
yeah, it's like I don't know. My insurance is so far beyond the deductible for the year. I don't. It's like past
I'll have the
February. I don't pay for
caviar,
anything for the
please.
rest of the
Do
year.
you have a what's the caviar version of an MRI?
I think it's like $3,000 or something.
Oh man.
But I don't have to pay any of it because I hit a deductible like literally February 1st.
Holy cow.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it's like what doctors haven't I seen this year? Let me go find one.
Yeah. What do you do? Let's get some of that.
Yeah.
That's funny.
How about you?
Oh, I'm yeah, I've been renovating or like now that it's dark again, working on projects inside that I've been
Yeah.
trying to finish for a very long time, but I finally got to some breakthrough moments where it like isn't getting worse, now it's getting better.
Oh, that's
It
nice.
feels so good. So
It's like you're
I've been
done deconstructing and you're reconstructing.
exactly. It's like,
Yes.
oh, that's why I was doing this. I forgot for a little bit there. Exactly? It's exactly right. Yeah, it's been a good week. I do. Um, I thought I was gonna like. I've been waking up much earlier than normal. Um, Trying a new thing out where I work like before I get my son ready for school, an hour before.
Hmm.
And normally I'm someone who will roll into an office at like 9:30,
Yeah.
9:35. So I've been trying that, and I thought daylight savings time would be nice, but I still just get really tired and wish it wasn't dark.
Yeah, it gets dark so early.
Yeah.
Oh,
But
hey.
yeah,
Go ahead. No, you go ahead. I was gonna change
I was
subject.
going to launch into subject matter.
Okay. I big news. We've officially joined a church.
Oh, okay.
Since we're talking, since we're talking faith journeys, I don't want to take too long on it, but we've decided to go ahead and officially join the church, the United Church of Christ here in town, and the official like I almost said swearing in. It's not really a swearing in, but
That's what
they
I
do
thought
make
too.
you
It was like the
they
swearing
do
in.
they do make you take an oath, like not like take an oath, but like say we promise to try to help this congregation and show up when we can, all that kind of thing. But yeah, it was. It almost felt too soon, um, but
Hmm.
the nice thing about it is I feel like it's a church where deconstruction is welcome and encouraged actually.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, this is a place where I feel like I can. It's like a safe space to still keep asking crazy questions and questions that I may not have answers to ever. And everybody around me is like, "Yeah, I was wondering that too."
Man, yeah.
So
I'm really happy
it's
for you.
it's nice.
I think that I think it's pretty amazing to be able to find that kind of space.
It is.
Um, and like actually be with real humans and get to do those two things at once, like dive into the to what it's like to be at church together and bring those questions with you. You don't have to leave them at home
Yeah.
as the
Yeah.
price of admission. So that's really cool. I
Yeah.
have not. I'm like a stray cat still. So I'm like, you know what? I'll come by when I want to come by, and I may like let you give me milk, and I may not. I may, you know what? I may just disappear for a few months. So I'm definitely in the skittish stage
Yeah.
um,
Well, I
right
honestly
now.
was too, but Christy was really, really for it, and the kids really were. They've been going to youth group stuff for a while, and they're really enjoying it. And I asked Hannah the other day, I'm like, So what are your thoughts about us joining this Plymouth Congregational Church? And she's like, sick. I'm like, that's a good sick, right?
Is that still good? Does it still mean good? It
It
meant
still
good
means
when I
good.
was a
Yeah.
kid.
Means good.
Good. All right.
So the kids are pretty excited about it. So.
My favorite joke still that I'll just say every time you mention the United Church of Christ is that the U makes a big difference.
Yeah.
But that would be a great slogan like UCC, where you make the difference. I got to work on it still.
That is great. Yeah.
There's some grammar to work through, but that's really cool. Okay, so I should have jumped into this after the remodeling thing because that was just perfect.
Oh,
But
sorry. I stepped on that point.
it's your fault. Actually, I just didn't realize that I was in a perfect spot until it was too late. But deconstruction is this big word. It kind of means a different thing for different people, but we've talked about it a lot, and it's one great way to describe what we're doing here is a deconstruction podcast. So a lot of what we're talking about and focusing on is the questions we have and the things that we're pulling apart or looking at, and just like when I'm remodeling my house, part of that process is destructive to things or to ideas you had. But deconstruction is a means. Deconstruction is not an end. Like deconstruction is how you do something, but it's not like why you do something. Like why you deconstruct is not just so that you end up taking something apart. The reasons to start are all kinds of things, but we're kind of like looking for something good. And just like with my house, it can feel like the worst part of it sometimes. Like, oh my goodness, I just pulled up this floor and found a bunch of black mold everywhere. And, I found it out. It goes like all the way to this thing that I didn't know I was even going to have to take down. It's frustrating,
Wow.
stressful, like it can feel like that a lot. And I feel like recently we've talked about some of those parts of it, like things that feel like we're taking a sledgehammer to something, or we pulled away a wall and we're like, oh man, there's even more to do than I thought. But I've got places in my house now where I finished taking the stuff apart so that I could start putting stuff in, new stuff. And then I got to this moment where I've got a complete room that just feels so much better. So I walk up there and I just sigh, and it's like, oh, it feels so good. Like, oh, that's what I was looking for. I was like, that's why I was going through all this stressful stuff, was for like, yeah, I was hoping that something like that was at the bottom of it. And so I thought I'd have a Come On In, the Water's Fine episode where we talk about some of the things that are the good things in the middle of this process. So how some of these things like doubt or curiosity or questioning can sometimes it feels like it's tearing something away or like it's exposing something, but how it can also reveal this richness to God's character or this depth of Scripture that you wouldn't have found if it weren't for this process. Kind of like when you rip out shag carpet and find out you have hardwood flooring underneath.
Yeah.
So I told you that I was going to use a top secret Old Testament story. I didn't tell you what it was. I wanted to keep you in the dark so that I would have the upper hand. So, but
Do
so
you have control issues, Nathan?
I do have. Yeah, that's how did you? Is my therapist talking to you? Yeah, I enjoy that very much, Steve. So yes. So here's what I'm gonna do. I'm going to tell you the top secret story
Okay.
that I didn't let you read about or research or prepare, and I did a bunch of research instead. And I'm just gonna ask for like from memory, what's your 30-second synopsis? What's the story?
Oh, great.
And then just like grill you if you get anything wrong. and tell you how. Just kidding. And then like, what's the moral of the story? So, um, okay, you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. So the story is the story of Uzzah. Uzzah.
Ah, Uzzah. Yes.
Uzzah. Okay, so tell us about Uzzah.
Uzzah was a dude around when David was the king, and they had lost a lot of respect for the Ark of the Covenant. They meaning the Israelites in general, and I forget where they were moving the ark to or from or whatever, but it was on a cart instead of being carried on poles by the priests, and the cart hit a bump and it started tipping over, and Uzzah reached out to steady the ark, and he touched the ark to stop it from crashing to the ground, and he died instantly because you're not allowed to touch the ark.
Yeah,
The end of Uzzah.
the end of Uzzah. And what is the moral of the story? What's the point?
Well, I've always been taught that the moral was like following everything to the letter that's in the Bible is so important that God will kill you if you do the wrong thing once.
Yeah.
I mean, essentially,
Yeah.
it's not a fun story, but I mean, I've probably seen 12 flannel graph renditions of it in my lifetime. They tell
Whoa.
how many? It's like how many stories like that do we tell little kids? It's like traumatizing.
That is traumatizing.
But
Yeah.
anyway, yeah,
So what's the moral of the story?
don't screw up or you die.
Yeah. The end.
The end. Yeah, there's
Come
no second
on.
chance.
Come
Yeah.
on. It's ridiculous that we. So where you get in pre curiosity, pre doubt, pre questioning, the
Hmm.
end of the story of Uzzah is if you don't follow the rules, you'll die.
Yeah, that's the vibe you get. I mean, because that's when you're in Bible school, that's where the story ends, and that's all it's really said.
Yeah.
Just to emphasize how serious God is about this stuff.
Which is crazy to me. Crazy to me. So I want to experiment with what if we got to the end of the story of Uzzah, or as I call him, Uzzah the Loser, because I don't know.
That'll work.
In my flannel graph rendition, and we just kept going. We kept asking questions. We followed our curiosity.
Okay.
So first, I want to start with ways that I've heard this. So I've heard it like, so even with good intentions, you better get it right,
Yeah.
right, because God's serious. But in our tradition, in the Church of Christ, we care a lot about one specific aspect of the whole thing, which is worship.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've seen this story get applied directly to worship. Like, you need to worship correctly. Um, have you?
Oh, I've heard it applied to all kinds of things. Yeah, it's a good. I mean, it's a good image because everybody's kind of studied something when it's falling off a table or whatever, so you can connect with it pretty quickly.
Yeah, it's like an intuitive reaction, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing. I always wondered like, he, it sounds like something that somebody would do, just like a knee jerk reaction without even thinking. And
And
I've
but
actually
then
heard that as well.
that's what it makes you think is like, wait a minute, don't follow your intuition. Like,
Yeah.
even if you're well-meaning, your intuition is going to lead you to the wrong direction.
Right. Yes.
So for the very small subset of when people apply this to worship, um, I'm just going to start by saying that's ridiculous before we move on, because in this story, what actually happens is that everybody in the whole country is worshiping except for two people. That's Uzzah and his brother. Right?
Uzzah.
The only two people. Yeah.
Sorry.
Um, Uzzah
I didn't
and
realize that. Uzzah his
Ahio.
brother. Okay.
Um, they're the like cart people, and everyone else is dancing in all of Israel.
Wait. Dancing
Yeah,
is
I know.
worship? Okay,
Um,
we're gonna circle back to that one.
they were getting crazy. They had wooden instruments, lyres, harps, tambourines, castanets, and cymbals. So they were going crazy. There's only two people in the whole country not worshiping, and that's Uzzah and his brother.
Okay.
So just that is just to say we can move this away from the like this has to do specifically with worship, or if we continued down that and it was like that they worship it incorrectly, then we would keep going to the very next story, which is David kind of correcting the error.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this big thing in the Church of Christ about not adding on to what God says.
Yeah.
But what David does is, well, I'll back up and tell the story. So here's the real story. So the ark has, since the time of the bad King Saul, has been not in the tabernacle. It was stolen, and it's got moved from place to place. It there was an enemy tribe that had it. They're getting cancer and being infected by mice or something. And so they realize it's because they have the ark and they shouldn't have. And so they voluntarily give it back to Israel.
Right.
With, a little idol of golden tumors and golden mice. But it's not like in a temple. There's no temple yet. And it's not in the tabernacle. It's just like in some guy's house.
Mm.
They're just like, find a guy's house.
Hasn't
Maybe
made it back home yet.
Hasn't made it back home. But nobody goes after it either. So that's kind of what David says is like, hey, we neglected this this thing. And he's building this city, so they want to move this from the house of Abinadab, where it's been for a while, to David's new city, Jerusalem. Right. So they I like this. They put it on a brand new cart, made for the purpose, for the occasion. They put it on a cart. Uzzah and Ahio, sons of Abinadab, are leading the cart. It's on a hill. They get to this. All the house of Israel is celebrating with music, but they get to this place, the threshing floor of Nacon, and Uzzah reaches out to the ark and takes hold of it because the oxen are about to fall over, overturn it. And the anger of the Lord burns against Uzzah. God strikes him down for his irreverence. And then David becomes angry because of the Lord's outburst and names the place, there was an outburst against Uzzah. So then he's afraid and says, I'm not bringing this thing to my city. So he gives it to someone else, Obed-Edom, a Gittite, and then it stays there for 3 months. And Obed-Edom, the guy who just randomly gets this ark that shows up at his house, he's blessed, and then things go really well for him. So, and if the story was about worship, in the next thing, David does this thing where he's like, man, we did it wrong. So we know he does at least one thing right. He has people carry the ark instead of put it on a cart. But then he adds this brand new thing that nobody's ever done. It's not the rule, where they only walk 6 steps and then they slaughter a bull and sacrifice it. And then they walk 6 more steps and then they slaughter another bull and sacrifice it. The whole time.
I've forgotten that 6 steps.
Every 6 steps.
That's a lot of bulls, man.
That's a lot of bulls. I don't know how far they're going, but 6 steps is not very many steps. I would have. How many bulls until you're like taking real big steps? You know?
Yeah. I'm just hoping that was mistranslated to like 6 miles.
But it's right. If you think about it, it's 6 rest, 6 rest, 6 rest, right? So very symbolic.
Every 15 feet, 18 feet.
Yeah. Something. A new bull. It'd be really bloody. Some other things he does is he wears a skimpy priest outfit and dances around. And they're playing trumpet music and everybody's dancing and singing with joy. And he's got this bloody parade. He's dressed so inappropriately that the ex-princess is like, David, that's gross. You need to stop it. And he's like, all the ladies liked it around, and then she doesn't get to have children anymore. So lots of stuff going on in the story. Um, but if we're starting from like, follow all these laws exactly, the very next story of him like kind of doing it correctly, he just adds all this stuff that's not like requested, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that's interesting. And then the thing that you said, which is I think the second mistake people make when they don't question, when they stop,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't continue with curiosity, is it's like, be careful, you never know, so you better follow all the laws.
Mm-hmm.
But what mistake that makes on accident that I've been very vocal about in this show is it elevates every rule to be equally important.
Yes. It does.
But God does not consider every rule to be equally important. And elevating all rules to like, God will be so angry that he'll kill you for any little minor infraction is irreverence. That is taking something from the story and putting it on God's word in a way that that is not what he says. There are not very many rules where God says, if you do this, it will kill you. There's lots of commands. There's some things that aren't commands. But something that's clear from the Old Testament and then crystal clear through the lens of Jesus, it is, there are some things that God cares about more than other things. It's not do every little thing or God will kill you. Like, this is one of the very few things where God said, oh, watch out, this will kill you if you do this. And a good example is God even kind of tells us this. So there's the story of Moses on the mountain, and he wants to see God's glory. And God, to paraphrase God, God's like, I'll be merciful when I want to be merciful. I'll have compassion when I have compassion, but I'm just telling you right now, dude, if you see me, that will kill you. It's not because I'm not being merciful here. The thing that's merciful is for me to tell you that will.
It's just physics here, right?
Yeah, it's like, listen, it's not. I'm being mean here. I've done that as a parent. Now to scale this all the way back, if my son asks for something, it's like, what happens when I touch the screwdriver on the outlet? I'm like, listen, it's not that I don't want you to try new things. Like, don't do that. And I mean, you can or do it, but I'm telling you what will happen, right?
Right.
So this is one of those things that God, we'll get to that later, but this is one of the few things that God's like, oh, and don't do that because you'll die. It will kill you, right?
Right.
He doesn't say that about everything. Anyways,
immediate death is not that common.
It is not, and all kinds of things went wrong before this, by the way. And the ark was captured, and like the people capturing it don't just like die instantly, even though they're clearly doing something wrong. It got onto a cart, which was wrong.
Yeah.
And somebody put it there, and it was in some dude's house, which was wrong, right? So, anyways, lots of people would have died if the principle here was, if you don't follow the rules, you'll just die, and that's it.
Right. That's a good point.
Which is what makes me so sad. So, stopping the story there, if all the rules, you better be serious about this, you better get it exactly right, or you will die, is the most boring, flattest path, smallest God ending to the story.
Mm-hmm.
Come on. And this is the only way this story is used, by the way. Like, this, so, but what if we stopped and we're like, what in the world? What in the world is going on? This is crazy. Because it is, right? What?
The punishment seems to really outweigh the crime.
And what if it's supposed to? What if it's supposed to be like a time when we're like, what? Come on, what is going on here? And you're supposed to start asking some questions.
Yeah.
So, one thing you miss is that like in the story, what David learns from this and does next, is that good? Because what happens is first he leaves. He's like, "Oh man, I'm scared of this thing. You can die from this. uh, I'm just gonna leave this at some dude's house." And the guy's name is Obed Edom, which means servant of Edom. Edom being another name for
Yeah.
Esau, the Gittite, which is a Philistine.
Right.
So thing number one that David learns from this is like, just leave this very important thing in like the hands of the enemy, in the servants of not the sons of Jacob, Israel, but Esau.
Hmm.
But then when he sees that those guys are like it's blessing them, it's like a good luck charm. That's when David is like, I could, maybe we could move it. I guess we could move it to my new town.
Okay.
Which I don't think is the right motivation. He started with good motivation. Like, hey, we've forsaken this. But in the middle of the story, what we see is he kind of just wants the good stuff that comes from this.
Yeah.
And then he throws the world's most showy parade to show how faithful he is.
Yeah.
And how sorry he is, because the bull thing is like a self-atonement for sin. But, every 6 steps is a little bit of like a showy apology, in my opinion.
Yeah, a little.
And he's, this is one of the David dancing naked stories. He's technically clothed, but he's unclothed enough that people are complaining about it.
Right.
And so is that necessarily like David is doing the right thing here? I think he is doing some good things here, but I still think we should notice his hypocrisy in only wanting the good things that come from God, and not like the
Yeah.
maybe the reverence part or the how powerful is God. Kind of like I like God as genie,
Mm-hmm.
but I kind of would rather leave God as so much bigger than I am that if I look at him I will die. I'd kind of like leave that kind of far away.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's one thing. One question I want to know is like why Uzzah? Because it was in some guy's house. I would say Uzzah and his brother clearly loaded this into the cart, or somebody clearly loaded this into the cart. Why didn't the oxen die? So when you ask that question, there's this thing that my mom taught me that she's really good at that I try to do when I read Old Testament stories, which is to ask what the place names mean and what the people names mean.
Mm-hmm.
Because often
Oh
there's
yeah.
something there. Sometimes there's not.
Right.
Sometimes there is and I can't find it. And sometimes it like hits you over the top of the head if you're willing to look at it. So there's three names in this that I just looked up. So like why Uzzah? I don't get it. Uzzah means strength.
Hmm.
Okay,
Okay.
fine. Uzzah means strength. Ahio is Uzzah's brother who didn't die. Like why did Uzzah die? Why didn't Ahio die? I know Uzzah touched it, but they're both doing the wrong thing. Why didn't the oxen die? Ahio means brotherly.
Okay.
Okay, and then they specifically mention where this happens. It happens at the threshing floor of, I say Nacon because it looks like bacon, so I assume it rhymes with bacon. Nacon. Okay, so you look up Nacon. Nacon means certainty. Okay, so
Hmm.
there's these two brothers, brotherly and strength. They're both walking alongside this cart, and then they come to the threshing floor of certainty.
Hmm.
And threshing is a very symbolic thing in the Bible. Threshing is when you beat wheat or grain,
Yep.
and what you're trying to do is get the good part, the nourishing part, to stay, and you're trying to remove the worthless part called chaff.
Yep.
So this Jesus talks about this, but it's all over the Bible. threshing floors are where you come to be sorted into like what's the good
Yeah.
stuff and what's the bad. Okay, two brothers. Here's the story told over. Two brothers, brotherly in strength, are leading the ark. They come to this threshing floor of certainty, and the strength tries to save God, tries to correct God or whatever, and is struck down. Meanwhile, brotherly has been leading through certainty and is left alone. There's a lot of things that could mean, but one thing that could mean is something like there's more than one kind of certainty, and our self-certainty that like we have the strength to do everything, or we know better than God, or we're even going to do something for God, maybe is not the strength we should hold on to or the certainty we should hold on to, where there's this this devotion to each other that when we come to that moment, that's something that we can be sure of. I don't know. So anyways, that's like a rabbit hole out on a limb thing. That's just an example of one of those, and it falls apart when you read Chronicles because the story happens twice. And in Chronicles, they're in the threshing floor of the tip of the spear, and it's not as good as certainty. But ultimately, you know, whether that means anything or not, the name thing, ultimately, I still think it's a valid question to come to this story and say, this doesn't make any sense. This is crazy. Like, so many things went wrong. Why Uzzah? What's going on? And so I think Uzzah was struck down because he did the wrong thing, begs a question, which is like, what was he supposed to do?
Yeah,
What?
I've often wondered that.
Like, what was the correct thing? Was he supposed to let it fall? And I believe that the answer to what was he supposed to do leads to Jesus. So when you stop, what you get is super scary legalism. But when you keep going and you ask the question like, well, what was the right way to do this? It's a fulfilling path. It's one of those moments that I think can lead to life instead of death. So, so then the natural study is like, oh, there's this ark. The Ark of the Covenant represented God's presence. It had some important stuff in it, and then there were rules about what you're supposed to do with it. So, the first thing you would find out if you answer that question, like, what are you supposed to do, is that the one specific son of Levi being the father of all the priest tribes, people in Israel. Yeah. He has 3 sons. One of his sons, Kohath, if you're a descendant of Levi and then also a descendant of Kohath, it's your specific job to carry the ark.
Right.
And if you were reading, you would find some weird things like, there's 2 other brothers, Morari and Gersham or something like that. And they, there's all these allotments that happen, and these people get this land, these people get this job. Well, the other 2 brothers get these carts and oxes. But if you're a descendant of Kohath, they're like, oh, but you don't get any carts. And then it says, because you have to carry your stuff on your body. You have to carry it yourself. No carrying with carts. Like, weird. Okay, the Kohathites, their job is to carry something on their bodies. That's a weird thing. And so then you read some more of the rules, and you see them dividing the parts of the tabernacle. That's what the Levites are in charge of. They run the temple or the tabernacle. Right. They're the priests for the nation, and they all have these different jobs. So, so just going along that again, Kohath and the sons of Kohath Kohath, whatever, are the ones who carry this. And you look up what Kohath means, and it's this verb that means either to gather together or to be obedient. So we have a word for this in English that means both of those things. It's when we say the faithful, we kind of mean like the gathering of obedient people. So Kohath, they're the obedient gathered together. They're responsible for the stuff in the very middle of the temple, the holy stuff in the very middle. That's the job they've been given. There's these two other brothers, that's all. Gershom or something. His name means to drive out or driven out on the outskirts. And you'd never guess what he's responsible for. He's responsible for the walls of the tabernacle. Oh, weird. Okay. So outside dude, responsible for the walls. Inside faithful gathering guy is responsible for the insides, the holy part where God's presence dwells. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Gershom gets to use carts, by the way. I don't know why. Then the third brother, Moriari or something, his name means bitter or strength. And those two things mean the same thing. So you can think of like strong coffee, right?
Okay.
It's like that kind of. So Mr. Strong or bitter is responsible, you'd never guess, for the pillars that hold up the tabernacle. So this strong guy is like the foundation they're like the big lumber guys. You could totally make a graphic novel about this where they have like superpowers, There's the strongs and they're the pillar people, and there's the driven out and they're like the, flaky curtain people. And then the faithful. And I know this is a weird rabbit trail, but we've gotten this far just by saying like, this is weird. What is going on? Instead of like, that's the end, and we stop looking at it. But I'm going somewhere with this. So, so we find out weird. Okay. So it's the responsibility of the faithful to carry the presence of God on their bodies. Huh. Okay. And then there's this other rule. It's really weird. I never caught this until asking this question. So the sons of Kohath, they're the carrier guys. They're not allowed to look at the ark, or they will die. Or any of the other they can't look at it, or they'll die. And there's all kinds of other holy things they carry, because the ark wasn't the only thing. There was the table of the something and the lamp.
Showbread, yeah.
They have to carry all of that stuff. But they're not allowed to look at any of it. And kind of by implication, what you learn is it says, okay, the other sons of Aaron, like everyone else except for Kohath dudes, they go in and they get everything ready, because apparently they're allowed to look at and maybe even touch this stuff. Okay, so weird. So how do they get it ready so that the Kohath guys can carry? They take this thing called the shielding curtain.
Okay.
And they take it down, and the shielding curtain is what separates the most holy from the holy, right? It's it's what makes the most holy place.
Separation.
It's the separating curtain. And this is the curtain that only one person gets to go through it only one time a year.
Right.
On the Day of Atonement, whoever's elected by lots sacrifices a bull, so he's clean. Then he goes in and does a sacrifice for all of Israel. So in the law in ancient Israel, that curtain can be crossed only one time, only in one circumstance. But anyways, they take that down when they're moving, and they fold it and they put it on top of the ark. So it's still like the Holy of Holy moves around now, because it's still covering the ark. So that the sons of Kohath can't see or touch, right, the ark, and that it's covered in leather as like extra protection. And then they put a blue little sash on it so it looks nice. So, um, when you think about that shielding curtain, what does that remind you of?
Well, when he the curtain. Oh,
Yeah,
when the curtain tore when Jesus died,
yeah,
the curtain in the temple tore in two.
that's the curtain.
Oh,
It's the same curtain. So the once the tabernacle becomes a temple, there's this same curtain. It's kind of purple and has cherubs on it, and it's what separates everybody from God.
right, right.
Um, Ironically, in the time of Jesus, there's nothing behind that. There's nothing behind the curtain.
Yeah,
Like the ark has been missing for a long time. It's kind of a sham.
yeah.
A priest once a year gets to go in and be like the biggest hypocrite in Israel. But in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, when Jesus dies, this curtain is torn in two
From top to bottom.
from top to bottom. So we started with this story that fills you with fear and this like uncertainty, like I don't want to do it wrong. But then you move towards like, man, this is where the faithful are carrying the presence of God on their bodies. That's a weird thing. This curtain is torn, and then you skip to Hebrews, and Hebrews 9 talks about this. He's like, hey, the presence of God was with Israel, etc.,
Mm-hmm.
etc. But now we can approach God with confidence because of what Jesus has done. We
Mm.
can approach God with confidence. It's this new thing, and Hebrews talks about the difference between that law of guilt and this new law of freedom. Um, and then that ends with the verse about we are not those who shrink back and are destroyed, but have faith and are saved.
Mm.
Um, and then finally, that makes me think about Second Corinthians. I can't remember if we decided if that was a pseudepigraph or not,
I
but
can't remember.
but there's this, Second Corinthians 3 kind of halfway talks about this and says like, okay, now if the ministry that brought death, talking about
Mm.
things like Uzzah, which was engraved in letters on stone, came with glory, so the Israelites could not look steadily at the face of Moses because of its glory, transitory though it was. Will not the ministry of the Spirit, so that's weird, it's the ministry that brought death, but now we're in the ministry of the Spirit, be even more glorious? If the ministry that brought condemnation was glorious, how much more glorious is the ministry that brings righteousness? For what was glorious has no glory now in comparison to the surpassing glory. And if that what was transitory came with glory, how much greater is the glory of that which is permanent? Since we have such a hope, we are very bold. We are
Mm-hmm.
not like Moses, who had put a curtain over his face to prevent the Israelites from seeing the end of what was passing away. Their minds were made dull, for to this day the same curtain remains when the old covenant is read. It has not been removed because only in Christ it's taken away. Even to this day, when Moses is read, a curtain covers their hearts, a veil. But whenever anyone turns to the Lord, that veil is taken away. The Lord is the Spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. And we all, who now with unveiled faces contemplate the Lord's glory, are being transformed into his image with ever increasing glory, which comes from the Lord, who is the Spirit. The end. So we start with this story that is the you better follow the rules or else.
Right.
But if you're allowed to say like that's crazy, what is happening? You could
Start
keep
questioning it.
and start asking those questions. Part of what we're doing when we're looking at these questions, the point is not, like I said at the beginning, the point is not to tear stuff down for the point of tearing stuff down.
Right.
The point is that there is so much richness that we aren't tapping into if we don't ask those questions. And
Hmm.
there sometimes there's stuff that needs to be removed and taken away that's like not useful or that's rotten or mildewy.
Hmm.
Um, but sometimes we've just prevented ourselves. What did I find? I was remodeling and I found a guitar. There was an entire little room that had accidentally got walled off, and there was a guitar in there. What's double 2 times 6? 12 string guitar.
Really?
Yeah,
In your house?
that like the previous owner, I don't even know if they knew about it, right? They inherited this house. Somebody did a renovation, right? So I'm taking stuff down, um, and
Wow.
and you make these discoveries, right? I also have found like walls full of spider legs. So it's it's both, It's
Yeah.
going through this process. Um, I guess one thing I wanted to say is like sometimes it's like, man, you know, it feels like I'm being told the Easter Bunny isn't real, and that's sad. But there are also these moments where you get to go beyond where that limit was before
Yeah.
and find something that adds a depth that it wasn't available before. It wasn't we that's the flannel graph never led to Jesus.
Hmm. Yeah.
But what if the point of that story, and I took a couple weird ways to get there, but what if the point of that story is to point to Jesus? And all you have to do is be willing to question some of the weird ones, like what? What does that mean? You know,
Hmm.
and it ends with this the opposite. One ends in fear, and the other ends in approaching God with confidence.
Hmm.
Um, so I think that is available, and I've experienced that. Is a weird way to get there, but in visiting a church that I'm not familiar with, or hearing from people who have different beliefs or different doubts, or have gone through something and lost their faith, or they're from whatever it is. All of those moments for me have been rich when I allow myself to hear those people's stories or
Yeah.
explore that thing. Sometimes it's difficult or hard, or it feels like we're tearing stuff down. But there's also those moments of redemption.
Yeah,
You know?
I like your description of the kind of the deconstruction thing as a tool and not as the end goal. Because if you think of it as a tool, like you said, where it can tear things down, but as you're tearing things down, not for the sake of tearing them down, but to I don't want take this metaphor as far as we possibly can. As you're tearing them down, it's like I'm taking it apart. I'm not bulldozing. If my beliefs in church and God and faith and the Bible and all this stuff is a building, I'm not coming in with a bulldozer and just flattening it and starting from nothing. I'm trying to kind of like use this deconstruction term to take it apart brick by brick and like let's look at this brick and examine it and make sure that it's actually needed, or is this a valid brick, or
Yeah.
is this like one of
How'd
those
this
like
brick get here?
cardboard bricks that you play with in like the nursery at church?
Yeah. Do you think everyone has those, or
I
just
hope
us?
so. I
I hope
hope
that's
so.
universal because those, yeah, those were
Those
awesome.
are always fantastic. Build a little fort.
Yeah,
Anyway,
or like an altar to sacrifice a kid on. That's
you had a
for
different
VBS.
childhood. Yeah. So, but I like that because you're right. If you go into the whole deconstruction world with the intent of just destroying everything, you're probably going to succeed. And that's I guess that's not where I want to go. I've there's some groups that I've kind of gone in and out of on Facebook and Twitter and places like that that it seems to be that their goal of deconstruction is to completely destroy a faith of any kind, and like they're like the self-congratulatory nature of getting to the point of being an atheist. Like, oh, it's like that's the goal.
It's like he graduated.
Yeah, it's like, well, I'm an atheist now, so I'm past deconstruction. It's like, what? What?
Yeah, and I think most people, we're I want to be a little careful because I think most people who go into what we call deconstruction, they're not really. I don't think they choose to do that. Uh,
No.
I think most people they kind of find themselves there, either by listening too much to their church, like taking it actually seriously all the way to its logical conclusion,
Mm-hmm.
and you kind of end up like with questions there that get you kicked out. Um, or you have hurt, or there's lots of reasons why you go through this. I think there's very few people who start happy with nowhere to go, and then say like I'm going to deconstruct now. But once you're in the middle, wherever you came from, in the middle of it, um, there's a in the even in the middle of the deconstructing. At least my personal experience has been there are so many gems,
Oh yeah.
so you could continue on and it end up having a completely uh, destructive deconstruction, or you can go on and it could you can renew what you believed originally, or you can go on and kind of have a changed faith that kind of is feels more mature to you or feels like a next step. There's lots of destinations of deconstruction, but um, I think what you alluded to, like there's some now that we know what it's called and we can talk to other people, and it kind of can become part of an identity. I would definitely say like, yeah, it shouldn't be the destination. It's like therapy. Therapy is not the
Mm-hmm.
goal.
Yeah.
The goal is
Right.
not
That's a
to
good
be in
analogy.
therapy. The
Good
goal is
analogy.
maybe to be out of therapy, or the therapy is to something else, and
Right.
deconstruction is to something else. And I want to encourage people that there's a lot of good in that journey, wherever that journey's going. It's I think that the spirit can absolutely be present and showing you things and teaching you things while you're questioning like what does the spirit do and do I believe in it.
Yeah. And along the way, if you, I feel I mean, I'm talking in generalities, obviously, but I feel like if you can get to the point where you are questioning things and just asking honest questions and trying to get like dig deeper, like you're talking about, and you allow yourself to go through that, and you can, even if it takes some weird turns, like you were talking about with the thing of with Uza, then you may end up getting to a place that's like you said, that's a lot deeper.
Right.
You may get into a place where you're like, that doesn't make any sense anymore.
Right.
But
Yeah.
it's one of those, no question should be dangerous things. And I feel like a lot of things that I was taught about the Bible and about these stories about especially the Old Testament, because there's lots of good death and mayhem stories in the Old Testament. When you're taught that there's like one answer to it or one moral to that story, and looking back at how the Jewish, like the rabbis and scholars of history or throughout history, have looked at the scriptures, the Old Testament and the prophets, the law and the prophets, they rarely consider one story to mean one thing. They're
Yeah.
always like riffing on that and like, what if this is an analogy for this other thing? And I mean, it goes down some weird rabbit holes, but that seems to be that's kind of how the tradition of reading the Old Testament has been for thousands of years. And then we come along and we're like, well, it's only can only mean one thing. And if you ask any questions about it, then you're probably asking dangerous questions. You probably should
Right.
shut up.
Yeah, that's such a good point because I think to you ask the question and you can ask the wrong question and get something valuable out of it.
Yeah.
But so what is dangerous is not the questioning, What's dangerous is when you don't question and you stop and you've got the certainty that there should be no questions, that this is the
Mm-hmm.
end. And what you're talking about, that it's modern, it's modernity or modern thought that says this thing has one meaning. There's one answer to this question. It means this. But like you said, this is a book, the whole book, but especially the Old Testament, is designed to be read over and over and over and over so that you find that deeper and deeper and deeper thing or new thing, that different thing, or you see it from a different light and you ask a question that you've never asked before. And so the Church of Christ tends to have a one-to-one mapping, like this verse results in this proof
Mm-hmm.
text.
Right.
There's a tradition in the Catholic Church that every verse has three meanings. One's like the
Oh.
literal, well, it might not just be the Catholic Church, the literal, the like figurative, and then the what's the word for that? Prophetic, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which, in my opinion, is just as rigid to limit. When you come with that, either Church of Christ saying this means one rule for my life because the Bible is a rule book, or if you come at it with the Catholic version of like, oh, okay, what's the literal, what's the figurative, and what's the prophetic? Um, it's 7 times 7 that complexity. It
Yeah.
doesn't stop there. And I think that
Yeah.
law of like that idea of the law of freedom, where there's this confidence, like we don't have to go through and dig for what's the perfect rule that I'm going to follow correctly, because it was simplified so much that we can't miss it through Jesus. So now we get to go through it in freedom and in complexity or in curiosity, and we're not afraid. We're not looking for the thing that's like, um, what did I do wrong? It's we get to see this depth that even maybe pre-Jesus that the rabbis didn't get to read into
Mm.
it because they
Yeah.
weren't reading it um, through that law of freedom.
Hmm. Yeah. I forget who said this. I think I've probably heard multiple people say this lately, but said a religious person who is certain is a very dangerous person.
Well, Trevor said that when we talked to him,
Trevor said that.
but
Okay. Yeah.
I don't think he's the only person. Yeah, but I
No, that's
agree.
where I'm.
Yeah,
Yeah. But yeah, it's to your point. That when you cease asking questions, um, it's like when we. I remember, I don't know how many times when we were growing up, I was told, and I think this still holds true, that as soon as you think that you've got it all figured out, that's that feeling is a guarantee that you haven't got it all figured out,
yeah,
and
and
it's
we
kind of like
we
that.
know this. We know this in life. Like certainty is what a
Yeah.
young person has, and then wisdom is what an old person has. If you
Right.
follow the line in the correct, this is not how everybody works, but you go from simplicity to complexity as a human, and you go from black and white and certainty to you live and you hurt and you see other people live and hurt. And so you're supposed to get to the end of that with a more nuanced view of things, able to empathize with more people, hopefully, able to see why other people have thought different things. And so that should happen in our religious thought too.
Mm-hmm.
If we just stop at, even when I talked about, my reading of it, where I get to the end and say it points to Jesus, um, I could turn that into a fundamentalist black and white thing. Like, oh no, this is the correct way to read it. Right?
Right.
This is the right answer. That's not the point. The point is not to move from, oh, I thought the right answer was this, but it turns out now I'm 100% certain that this is the right answer. You're doing the same thing. It's the same
Right.
problem, right? It's the out of the frying pan and into the fire. Um, because that's just a different kind of fundamentalism or a different kind of certainty. The point is to read from like, I know all the answers, this is the one thing, to approaching with a little bit of reverence and mystery, that what can I learn from it this time?
Yeah.
Maybe it's different than last time. Or what does this apply to now? Or what, like what new question do I have? Or even, am I willing to accept the answer I've always been given for what this means? Or am I willing to read it again and maybe end up at the same spot, or maybe end up somewhere else?
It kind of makes me think of Jewish mysticism, which is kind of it's a broad term for lots of different kinds of thought, but it's more around kind of like what you're getting at as far as trying to kind of like listen for God, not a still small voice type listen for God, but be open to lots of different experiences that can teach you about God through scripture or through the religious practice of like singing the songs or repeating the prayers or things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And just because there is so much mystery. And I remember your dad telling me, he kind of sat me down after a Bible class I taught at one point, and I was talking about some very certain things. I forget totally what the topic was, but he's like, don't forget that there is some mystery involved, and we've forgotten about the mystery
Yeah.
of God and of the Bible and how it works. Because I'm like, oh, this is how it works, end of story, period.
Right.
He's like, maybe I'm gonna back off a bit.
Yeah, I think I like that, the like leave room for mystery, which is a humbling, like, approach this humbly.
Yeah.
Where was it gonna go with that? And we've, I'm beating this horse to death here, but you can't do that if it's of life or death importance to get everything correct.
Yeah,
that's
true.
the thing that allows you to not have room for mystery. Or even when you change your belief and now you believe this other thing with 100% certainty and it's the correct way, that's because like the impulse is to just be correct or get it all correct, or that because we kept hearing the story of Uzzah on flannel graph, where like it matters to get everything exactly correct. So I got to take a second look, but the point is to get it correct. But the gospel is not Jesus came so that we would get it correct. And through Jesus, we can be, I guess, right about things, but I don't think God cares about us being right about things. I don't think Jesus cares about us being correct. He cares a lot more about our relationship with God and our relationship with other people. And there are people who are wrong about everything. I've worked with people who I worked at a hardware store. You ask this one guy, like, where's this kind of screw? And he's going to tell you the wrong answer.
Every time.
He's never correct. You'll be like, hey, how do I do a miter joint? Wrong answer is what he's going to give. Or like, what's a good way to seal up this? He's going to tell you something not good, right? Like, he is not correct very often. But that didn't get in the way of him loving people or having a right relationship with people.
Right.
And I am someone who is correct all the time, as you've been listening to this podcast long
clearly,
enough, but somehow I have managed in my correctness to screw up lots of relationships and to not have the priorities of Jesus. Like you can be correct about almost everything and completely miss the whole gospel.
Yeah.
You can be wrong about almost everything and you can get it. And so, I'm going to start telling stories about Jesus, but he says that all the time.
Yeah.
The Pharisees were not the people who read the Bible the wrong way. The Pharisees who read the Bible so that they would be correct.
Right. Yep.
And the people that Jesus lifted up were not the people who got it more correct than the Pharisees, because nobody did get it more correct. They did get it the most correct. I think we forget that sometimes.
Yeah.
It's not about a path towards increasing correctness. It's about stop bowing to the idol of correctness. It's not the thing that saves you from eternal damnation. It's that's not in the gospel. Go read the gospel. Look for
Yeah.
like who is correct, and did Jesus care that they were correct about it, or was he mad at them that their correctness was more important than people?
Right.
You got me on a soapbox, Steve.
That makes me think of this whole thing with Uzzah. Made me think of Nadab and Abihu. I don't know how many times I've been told the story of Nadab and Abihu to illustrate this exact same thing. Of you must be like to the letter correct. Uh, it's Leviticus 10. They 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 start burning some incense, and they offered, it just says they offered a strange fire before the Lord that he had not commanded them, and he kills them, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
And that was used over and over and over, just like with Uzzah. Like, you do this tiniest little thing wrong, and I'll be curious after we're done. I might dig into the story of them and figure out, is there a reason they did that? Is there a reason they, like, what led to that? You know, because there's always a backstory.
Right.
And is the point really that they did the wrong fire, or is it, was there all kinds of things that led up to that was like was it a systemic problem, or I have no idea.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Or can you in good faith take that story and stop asking those questions and just say, so you better not shout because I'm telling you why. You know, like is because especially if you stop there, like fine. I kind of get upset in children's ministry when the point of the story is to obey
yes,
and be
yeah,
nice. It's like, come on, kids can understand the gospel of loving other people. It doesn't all have to be so follow the rules or else, right? But fine, if you're going to teach the kids to follow the rules, then maybe in junior high go to the story again. But we don't return to that story with adult curiosity or adult study. And so then we have the leftover trauma from that flannel, and you're like, is an LED light strange fire or whatever you're afraid of, and you you carry that into adulthood like, oh, I can't remember where this feeling is coming from, but you better do it all right, and somebody just did something different, and so I need to stand up and walk out of that worship service because I cannot stand for this. Like that's kind of where that comes
yeah.
from.
It kind of makes me wonder how much have we screwed each other up by treating the Old Testament as a book of kid stories. You know,
Oh man, the
because
so
like you said,
that's
you go through, you teach these preschoolers about this guy who died because he touched a box, right?
yeah.
And you got to obey. All and
Or
then that's
Saul
stuck
who
in your
didn't,
head,
yeah, like he didn't kill everyone and he should have. Like okay.
right? Yeah. Or
Um,
Achan, who took the money from when they pillaged, was it Jericho? And he took some money and hid it under his tent, and they stoned him and his whole family.
the amount of
That's what.
prostitute stories that I heard before I was 12.
Oh, right.
Also, like any story involving Noah is inappropriate for children.
Yeah.
I don't care that there's a zoo involved, right? They're like the
You
whole
just gotta
no
stop at the right point, man,
yeah. Yeah.
and
Like
and gloss over the fact that there will
gloss
be
over
like,
the all the dead people and stop before the
right,
naked part,
right.
right?
The earth would have smelled horrible afterwards. That's why they stayed in the ark for like another few months.
Yeah. But the point of the wine story is don't drink wine. Pretty sure.
Right. Right.
Moving on.
Moving on. And the point of Lot and his wife leaving the town is don't turn around because you'll turn into salt. You know.
Right.
Anyway, we teach all these stories to these kids, and they're internalized for kids growing up in church. And then we become adults or even teens, and we don't go back to those stories and dig in again and say, well, what is there a further meaning to this? Or is there something else that maybe I'm supposed to learn about God?
Add flesh
We
to them.
just
Yeah.
we go, oh, well, I learned that story as a kid. Why should I have to rethink about that one again? You know?
Meanwhile, Jesus is very kid friendly,
Oh yeah,
and the gospel of Jesus, that, by the way, like, kids in Jesus' time got to hear. There's no kids, like, the only kids in the Old Testament are the ones that get stoned. There's not like children and David. I don't know.
or
Okay.
attacked by
Anyways,
bears.
yeah.
Yeah,
But Jesus, the gospel is so simple that it can be understood by children
yeah,
in a children way. And then when you're older, you need to understand the gospel in a slightly older way. And then when you're slightly older and more mature, like, there, it's simple in the kind of way that, like, I don't know, a sunset is simple. Like, the depth continues going.
yeah.
Um,
Like Jesus says, if you become like one of these little children, because children just love people,
they're curious too. They love people.
right?
They don't question, like, who they are.
Right.
Uh, um, that doesn't prevent them from the love. Yeah, we should absolutely be teaching children New Testament stories, especially gospel stories, and adults, we should be teaching them Scripture, aka the Old Testament.
But if your goal is to create a group of people who will do what they're told and will not question authority, then we're doing it the right way already, because that's what he
Or
does.
or when they get to that feeling, whether it's them questioning something, or them being something not okay, or someone in their group is questioning, it 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 activates your adrenaline, and you suddenly have a fight or
Yeah,
flight. Like, wait a minute, this is not okay. Either I'm not okay for feeling this way or being this way, or they are not okay. We cannot abide this thing, this reexamination or questioning or curiosity or ignorance. You can come in and ask. That's a sad thing, like the story of my friend. You can come in with a clean slate and you will have these questions, but we can't
yeah,
answer them because we've never allowed, like, those questions in a safe environment. So the questions are always scary and dangerous.
yeah. And it's interesting you brought this up because I just started reading this past week. Last week I mentioned the podcast, The Bible for Normal People,
Yes.
and I finally just uh, bought the book. Um, Shoot, I just lost the name of it. How the Bible Actually Works by Peter Enns, Enns. He's one of
Okay.
the hosts of that podcast, and he's got like all these degrees in biblical whatnot, and well, he comes at. I wanted to recommend this book for people who have been maybe a little bit shaken by some of the previous episodes about the the issues with the Bible, because he does a great job of he comes from that perspective of kind of a scholar of there are issues with the Bible,
Okay.
but he also comes at it from a very kind of, as we're speaking of it now, kind of from an adult perspective, as far as it's not a bunch of stories for kids. It's not it's not a rule book. We've talked about this before. And he even says some of the things that you've said in the past. Like, if you wanted a book to tell you how to do church the right way, this is
Yeah.
not the book you want.
It does a very
This is
bad
the wrong
job.
book. It's a very
Yeah.
very bad job at that.
Yeah.
And so he talks a lot about how looking at the Bible as not this history science uh, book, but a book about helping us become wise and follow wisdom and know God enough. And through knowing God, we can get closer to more wisdom. I'm
Huh.
only like 3 chapters into it, but it's really good so far. And that's kind of where I feel like I'm going in general. I mean, I know that there are some serious issues with the Bible historically, um, textually, all that kind of stuff. But there is enough there's enough in there that helps me understand the world in general, like how like help me understand the world in general as far as how people work with each other, how we should treat each other, how treating each other. It's like these things have been proven out to work. You know, if you act like Jesus, then the world will be a better place. And so I'm trying to look at the Bible more as like helping me understand God, helping me find the wisdom, helping me to be more Jesus-like, and this book has been helpful so far along those lines.
That sounds. Yeah, I'll have to check that out. If I'm hearing it correctly, I think I agree with the premise, which is that if you can misuse the Bible, we know. I mean,
Right.
clearly. Um, and so if you are someone who holds Scripture in a high view, it should be important to ask yourself: am I using this in the way it's like meant to be used, or am I misusing it? And so I think something that's important to know is what is the Bible trying to do right now? Like, what is the purpose of this? And it changes. That's the other thing is like the saying the Bible is like saying the Constitution plus all of the laws in Congress. Like they're like
Yeah.
and the Declaration of Independence. Like they all do slightly different things in different ways. So if you read the book of Psalms, the same as Genesis 1, the same as Hebrews, you're at least going to get one of those wrong.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
but
And
if
and go ahead.
like reading the Bible in the way that it was intended to be read is important, and
Mm-hmm.
learning that. Um, but also, um, I think like understanding that from an outside view. So seeing how the Bible works can help you orient yourself with like, oh, what's going on here, or how did it get here, or what time period was this written, or what language was this written in, or those are all things that can help you get closer to basically avoid misusing the Bible.
Yeah, and those are, and to me, they're just kind of layers of the onion, deeper than like first layer, the like the little papery skin that you kind of want to throw off. It like
Yeah.
protects the onion, but you want to get rid of it because
Yep.
that's like don't touch the ark means don't do anything wrong or you'll die,
Yes.
right?
Outside of the onion.
And
Yeah,
further
definitely.
in, you can kind of look at it more as an adult and kind of dig into this what this why was it there, what did these place names mean back all the way to the temple, yada yada. And then further in is like asking questions about the book that it's in. Maybe like Samuel. Like what's Samuel's deal? Where did that book come from? And then for the like asking, I think we should be feel free to ask questions about the Bible itself and follow where it leads. And I love I just looked at the subtitle to this. The Bible actually works. It says, "In which I explain how an ancient, ambiguous, and diverse book leads us to wisdom rather than answers, and why that's great news."
Hmm.
And I like that so much because I'm kind of at a point where I I'm realizing how much I don't know. I left off. I took off to Germany, Mr. Man with the Bible
Answers.
degree,
Yeah.
and I had answers. I'm gonna let you folks in Germany know all the answers. And came back and I had more answers, and I was excited to tell people the answers that I found. And now I I'm still excited to talk to people about this stuff, but I'm more excited about the questions that I have.
Yeah.
And like what could those answers mean? But I come away with it with fewer answers, but I hope more wisdom. I mean, some would maybe disagree with that for sure, but
I think
um,
the process of that, wherever somebody is, that's what important is, like letting go of answers and moving towards questions or wisdom, or I called that faith. I called it from certainty to faith, or
Yeah,
from
it is.
certainty to doubt, and it, or from milk to meat. Like that, it's not something where even us certainty Christians, if you're familiar enough with the Bible, it's like what we're talking about is in there, and is you're supposed to grow up, and you're
Yeah.
supposed to not just grow physically, but grow in compassion and wisdom. And we're even told, like, if you're a faithful Christian, then the Spirit is supposed to push you in this direction, and it's this direction of change. It's not like a baptized and then you're in the destination.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Well, it's a good time to plug the book that we're going to be doing for our book club again.
I think so.
In
Yeah,
episode 40.
because it took me too long to read it.
Well, and I needed to read it again. And but it's all about, the Faith After Doubt is the book, and it's all about going through these stages of faith and what this might mean. And he doesn't prescribe a way you have to do it, and he talks about how you're going to go back and forth between these stages from different times.
Yeah,
But it's this. It really, I think it sums it up in this subtitle of this other book about how it leads us to wisdom. And that's kind of thing where I'd like to get is wisdom about God, about the world around us, how to interact with each other, how to interact with God, how to interact with ourselves, how to understand ourselves. I think there's just so much more depth to the Bible and to faith and to God than when we thought that it was just an easy answer.
yeah,
So that's one reason I've told many people that I since going through all this stuff that what I'm going through, I honestly feel closer to God than I have before. And I haven't really been able to put a finger on it until our conversation just now. This has been helpful because I couldn't figure out why, and I think I'm understanding why, because I'm allowing myself to not know, and by doing that, you allow yourself to receive or find answers that you didn't think were answers before, because you already had the answers, so anything else was immediately wrong. You shut down that line of thinking. When you allow that to open up, it can take you some really fantastic places.
definitely. Yeah, it's like we've talked about the burden that we didn't know we were carrying when we realize that the gospel really can be summed up in love God, love others.
Yeah.
And that makes things make sense, like that Jesus is what yoke is
Easy.
light, easy, and his burden is light.
Yep.
Like, wow, it's one thing to read that and know that that's the answer, but wow, it's another thing to feel the burden fall off of your shoulders.
Yeah.
And to walk around in that freedom. It's incredible.
Yep.
And yeah, that's the whole thing I was trying to say is it feels great. Like the end is not just this taking apart. There's also that levity and freedom and confidence and that comes from like not making up your own burdens to put on your own back. So
Yeah, we've got enough, man.
oh man, yeah, no kidding.
Don't add to it.
Yeah.
See, that's probably what happened with your house. Somebody's like, I'm so sick of my mom making me practice this guitar. I'm just going to wall it up and never pretend it wasn't there.
Yeah.
Don't need any more burdens. So is it work, the guitar?
I was in really bad shape, but that would have ruined the metaphor.
Oh, sorry.
So I didn't want to bring that up.
Pardon.
Thanks. Yeah. So I gave it to someone else. I was like, here, I'm such a nice guy. Gave it to someone else. But still cool. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah. I thought that I found a hole. This is how. This is maybe bonus material. I had an electrician over. I've got a weird shaped house, and I swear we both thought we discovered a secret room in my house, and it was like scary because we like open up this hole and you look in this little room and there's a little table with a bunch of stuff on it and there's like light in there and you just have that moment like there's a secret room in my house that someone like lives in.
Wow. How big was this secret room that you found?
Oh, it looked like it was going to be like 3 feet by 3 feet or something. You know, it's like you wouldn't notice it. It's kind of like
Yeah.
you know, you don't know where the walls end. I was like, there's a secret house in my there's a secret room in my house, and someone has been living in there for the past who knows how long, undiscovered to me. It's like the premise of a horror movie. It turns out I just have really bad depth perception, and it's just my room. And we were just looking at it at such a weird angle.
Oh, it's actually your room?
Yeah, but both
That
of us,
pool looks familiar.
yeah, it's like closer than we thought it should be, and at a different elevation because we were like went up and down stairs to get to this other place. So there's an analogy in there somewhere, like you know,
Oh, that's great.
yeah.
Well, great topic tonight. That's really
It's kind of
open your eyes.
monologue-y.
Ask questions, get deeper.
Yeah, don't stop.
See, we could have saved an hour and a half, man. Just said that and moved on. Ask
Yeah,
questions, get deeper.
that's the answer. Why would you have to talk more than that? The end.
No, don't ask good questions. That's the answer.
Yeah, that's the answer.
Ironic.
Yeah.
Oh,
All
man.
right. We'll have to do
Been
this
fun,
again
man.
sometime.
Sometime. See you later.
See ya.